Welcome to MT Fridays. We're Melonya Johnson, owner of BSMART Coaching, and Tahitia Timmons, owner of Conscious by Us. Together, we're here to fill your Fridays with unscripted conversations that cover the gambit: politics, current events, science, social justice, health and wellness, and more. We're here to elevate the conversation. We're fighting the brain drain, one unscripted conversation at a time. So grab your coffee, tune in, and let's dive into another episode of MT Fridays.
Hello, Tahitia.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I am good today. How about yourself? Let me mute my phone. How are you?
I'm good too. Like it's been a week, right?
It has.
And you and I, we were very good. We did not have like what so this is like everything is going to be fresh and new and magical, like first time. So it's really going to be like us unscripted and
Yes.
so.
Well, welcome, folks, to MT Fridays. I'm Melonya, one of your hosts, and
Tahisha, I am also one of your hosts.
and
And
we get together on Fridays and talk. We
you
we
do.
did this
You do.
before our podcast, and Tisha kept saying we should film these, and so here we are talking about everything from politics, relationships to uh, what's trending, whatever pops into our minds. But I'm coming to the table today with a moral dilemma.
Oh, okay. Okay. And I just want to say, for those who don't know, Melania and I are both coaches. Melania, if you want a fantastic coach to get you through your barriers and your needs when it comes to your business practice and change issues, she is the person to go to. I absolutely love everything that you give to me. And I'm not going to say anything because I know you have like an amazing program you're going to be launching. So I'm going to keep it a secret until you officially invite special people. Not everybody can go to this, okay? But she is amazing.
Thank you.
Now, that said, if you want somebody who is like very health focused, all around the like, how can I bring you to like the health equity piece and thinking about yourself a little bit more, I would probably reach out to myself. I do have some business tidbits here and there stuff like that. But she's really like the change getting like you really put my head on right. I'm like, a little bit more like, well, how do we want to resonate in that?
No, she's all about social justice. She's all about change in our workforce and change in our hearts. So you've got two amazing coaches here. If we toot our own horns, like shameless plug. But you know what? Today's conversation, well, part of the conversation, I shared this with you earlier, and it's about my neighbor. For those of you who don't know, I have an elderly neighbor who lives behind me. I've been in my home for 22 years, and I've always kind of kept an eye on her. But as she has aged, I call. To make sure that she's okay. I've given her a meal sometimes, and she doesn't have children. She lives alone. So, I do that. I did that for another neighbor as well. And I hope that as I age, that someone will, look after me in that kind of way. Well, I went to visit her on my birthday. And I visited her and another friend who were in rehab. She had fallen. My neighbor had fallen, broken her hip, and had surgery. And I knew, because the last 2 years or year or so has been really tough for her, I knew that this would be a real terrible blow, because she fell before, after having been attacked, had another hip surgery, broken ribs, shoulder issues. So I knew it would be hard for her. So I went to visit her on my birthday. Okay. And she started,
Happy birthday.
thank you. It's belated. It's past. But I
If you
celebrate.
want to wish her happy birthday, please do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll be celebrating all year.
Yeah.
But we started talking, and she started to I felt the conversation shift, and she started to move into politics. Now I know what her political stance is, and we've had some, rousing conversations. But she started intimating that Kamala Harris was a communist, and and we started talk, and I knew I should not have gone into that conversation. But I
Which
said,
that is another fascinating thing, right? Like being in a conversation and then you realize like you're about to enter a minefield where you think you know where someone is going to head or their thoughts, and you're like, do I want to do this? Because like I know I think that sometimes because I'm like, do I want to engage in a conversation that might make me feel differently, very differently about you?
well,
Like
see,
I can see how like this would be like.
that's what really what happened, because I'm not at the point where I'm really tired of the chaos. I'm tired of the conspiracy theories. I'm tired of the low information voters, right? I'm really tired of that. And and I said to her, I said, see, for me, this election has consequences, right? As a person of color, it has consequences, right? Because there has been a full charge across this country to change voting laws to make it more difficult for people like me to vote, right? We have a president who has stacked the Supreme Court to make certain that women no longer have rights to control
Past
their body.
president. Past president.
Past president, right? I know, because there's some people who still think he is. He's not, right? But and so with all of those things said, and we've seen this man's cruelty. We've seen him separate immigrant children from their parents, and some of which may never have been reunited again. We know that, and she talked about communism. He wants to be in bed with Putin, right? And so the disconnect that their minds have to go through in order to follow this man is quite amazing to me. But at the end of the day, I'm like, this really impacts my life. It's not some perceived threat. He is a threat for folks like me.
And so, and I'm not gonna, first of all, that is something I think a lot of people are struggling with, right? Like, how do you stay engaged with people who don't get that there are real harms that could come out of and I'm like, and we always say this is unscripted. We're not going to hold anything back, but I want to say this in a way that people don't get confused about, because it seems like when you talk about anything political, people take what they want from whatever you say anyways. But for me, I struggle with like, I'm going to have to interact with these people again at some point. And so how do I want to interact with people who don't get that there are harms to, because I'm also thinking about it, not just as a, a Black woman, a woman of color, a woman who has a business, a woman who maybe wants to be able to get hormone therapy, or because like that's on the table too. Like for older women who don't use birth control, right? Like hormone therapy is a form of birth control is hormone therapy in some ways. So I think we need to be thinking about it not just from the ethnic racial piece, but as women, there's some issues that are on the table for us as queer people, like whether you're trans or not, right? Like whether you want to be transphobic and distance yourself from that group. And because there are, queer people who are transphobic, and a lot of the issues and how they're kind of looking at like LGBTQ plus people and difference is they're focusing on those that are perhaps not as supported in our country. So women, we know women historically have been able to be quieted. Like Black people historically have been able to be mollified. Hispanic people have been historically been able to be approached from the patriarchy and like, this is going to be better for you when we talk about, immigration and like, you're good immigrants, right? Like we always push that, like love immigrants who get jobs. But when you talk about consequences, like for people who aren't getting that piece, I really struggle with like, how can you not get how you're going to harm your neighbors in some way? Or like your neighbors are scared, or your neighbors no longer view the American flag the same way because it's been pushed with so much hate and versus love. And, or like even Christians, right? So Christians, a lot of people are thinking about Christians in a different way. That and I saw something that said, and it was from the church that's near me because I was walking and there was a huge line, and there's always a huge line, and I never knew what it was. I thought it was for parking permits for the town. It's actually for the food pantry, and it stretches down the main road near here for blocks now, and they have people that regulate the line. And so I stopped this time and I was like, hey, like, what is this line for? And they were like, it's for the food pantry that the church has. And I was like, oh, wow. And I had forgotten that this is a big piece of what Christian churches did, food pantries and giving back to the public. And so when I looked to like verify this, because believe nothing now, right? So it is. And they had a thing that said, you will know us by our love. And I'll share it with you and I'll post it up. But they had crossed out things like, and I have it on my phone, so I'll just look at it real fast. But I found it to be like, and they'll know we are Christians by our political put downs crossed out, unkind means crossed out, name calling crossed out, divisive talk crossed out, and love was left. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think that anymore. But when I was a kid, I kind of did. And for those who don't know, I'm not Christian. My mother is Jewish. So, but I had a different thought. And so I think that, like that disconnect that you're talking about, that people are doing, like, I think all of us are kind of like doing similar things because I have different thoughts about groups with the shift than I did previously when I was a kid. Like, I definitely think differently about the Republican Party than I did when I was a kid. Like, I'm scared. I don't remember being frightened, scared, or concerned about the way that I would be able to interact in society if someone got elected. Like, and I don't know how to explain that any differently. And I don't know how I feel about people who would vote for someone who would, like, that's what I'm struggling with. And so when you said I have an ethical sort of like
a moral
like
dilemma.
Moral dilemma. Like, do you stay friends with these people who
Yes.
have, I want to say unconscious racism and homophobia and sexism and
or let me just say this: a high tolerance for it. It's not a priority for them, right? It's not. I'm not going to label everyone a racist or homophobic, even though in my heart of hearts, I think it lives in you if you're able to accept that. Because, quite frankly, I could never vote for a candidate, and I'm an independent, and I'm agnostic. I'm wearing a cross today. I used to be a Christian, right? But I like my cross. If you are able to, well, I had a manager once that said, when Trump was running for the, against Hillary, I'd rather vote. I said I could never, because that she was always talking about politics, and she was a Republican, and in the workplace, right? Okay. And so I got fed up one day, and I said, look, I could never vote for a racist. And she goes, I'd rather vote for a racist than a criminal. And I thought to myself, you do know, white woman, that you're talking to a Black woman, right? That you just told this Black woman that you're comfortable voting for a racist. How does that not impact your relationship?
I'm curious, was she a criminal then? Is she
No,
a criminal
she's
now?
not a criminal now.
So like it's that dissonance, it's that like disinformation. Like there's also a lot of disinformation, and there's a lot of like I saw something that with this particular election, there's been a lot of like sort of like is this legal sort of recruiting of not recruiting of voters. I don't want to say that because you can't recruit people to vote a certain way. Like, and you can't be a business that does that. But I was reading about how like and if you want to read about like for the audience, whoever is watching this, if anyone watches this, uh if you want to just like find niche stories about, how the different parties are doing things. The New York Times has done, as always, a great job of covering different pieces from an almost neutral perspective. I'm not going to say they're 100% neutral, but because some of their stories lean a certain way, depending on the writer. But they had talked about how Cards Against Humanity had this thing going. And I don't think I mentioned this to you, where they were giving people money if they made a voting plan. And so businesses can't, and it was a voting plan for independence. I think I don't know all the details to it, so I probably shouldn't speak to it. But it was in response to Elon Musk, who had kind of done something that was, people were like, we're not so sure of the legality of, but it like these type of things like kind of tread the line of you can't pay people to vote a certain way, but you can almost get up to the line with some of these businesses where if you make a plan to vote, right? Like they're not telling you who to vote for, but if the plan to vote also includes like calling out, like making fun of Trump or something like that, that might be considered sort of leaning. But Trump has some emails that have gone out that encourage contests, right? Like you get to meet with him or contest giveaways and things. And so the New York Times is talking about how, like, so far there haven't been a lot of winners. So is there truth in what, the party is saying? Like, are was she a criminal at that time? No, she's not a criminal now.
No.
You said like this person would vote for, they would rather vote for racist.
Right.
Similar things. But I heard things from Black friends who were like, well, better to know who the racist people are. Like I was hearing a lot of that. I don't know if you were hearing
No.
back when he was running, like, well, I would rather he be like just out there being racist
Yeah.
because like he's
I,
just
I, I,
showing
I
that,
don't need to see your ugliness. I don't. And so what my challenge is in the midst of this is, I walk my dog, I pass her home, I still look out to, make certain that things look intact and whatnot. But I'm really struggling with whether I should reach out to her or go visit again. And the moral dilemma is that I really strive to be a good human every day. And
she does.
and part of being a good human is being your brother and sister's keeper, right? To be kind and to be forgiving and hope that people forgive you and to look out for people, right? But and as soon as you say but, it negates everything you said prior to it, right? But I and we had this conversation, when it happened is, I don't hang out with racists. I don't hang out with misogynists. I don't hang out with homophobes. I don't. That's not my tribe. I don't want to be around that energy. And so if I decide to, not contact her, right? Then I say to myself, did whoever is orchestrating this division within our country, do they win? Because now I'm falling right into the trap, right? And I saw I don't know if it was a YouTube or article I read, but a number of folks have their families have been broken because of different political and it's no longer an ideology. I think that it has morphed into something, because there used to be a Democratic ideology and a Republican ideology and independent, but it's morphed into something even deeper than that, I feel. And so I do feel this dilemma. Like, do I reach out to her because I know that she would probably appreciate, the knowing that somebody cares about her, and that, when you are away from your home, that somebody's keeping an eye out to make certain that, all things are intact. And I know that it would do that for her. On the other hand, a part of me is like, your misinformation, your political leaning, your all of that makes you, I don't know, makes me want to not engage.
Well, and so you and I have talked a little bit about this before, because so backstory here, I was married to a Republican. And I have friends who are Republican, and I have friends who are queer, and also, in my mind, a little homophobic about certain things. And so when I said, well, I struggle with this because like I have people in my life important people in my life who I have to step away from sometimes because I don't want to encounter some like energy draining things. And you challenged me because you were sort of like, well, why? Like, why would you put yourself through that? And so in most of these cases, I've noticed that the people that I remain engaged with attempt to make changes and are willing to move their thinking along and are willing to listen and hear and actually take information in. So, for example, like my ex-husband who's Republican, and I don't have any issues with people being Republican or anything like that, because, it's more I think what people struggle with is how can you vote for a party and not examine all of the things that they're pushing and then make a determination like the harm for the people in your life. So that's how because I'm not a Democrat. I think Melonya and I are both kind of the same on this. We're independents. But when I go and I vote, I tend to think about it like, who's going to do the least harm? Maybe that's the medical piece speaking, like do no harm. So I'm like, who do I think will have, and maybe Americans don't vote like this. Maybe we're uneducated voters. Do you remember that in Uneducated Consumer? Is like there were these commercials when I was younger, and it would be like an uneducated consumer is like not a good customer. But they wanted, I think it was like some kind of clothing store, but they wanted educated consumers. And so maybe as like we Google reviews on buying stuff all the time. And like I know people who to buy anything will vet it 1,000 million ways. Yet most of us have no idea what a council person in our town, what their platform is. And that person's probably going to impact your life. Like you can talk to people about political, like election stuff, and they'll be like, well, I'm voting this way. And they just vote party wise. And so like, I have never been content to do that. And so like, when you were saying like, well, what do I do? Like from a community standpoint, we're all about building community. But I also like when I think about voting and like who's going to do the least harm, when I think about my friends now who have different opinions or very different opinions, especially during the political season, who is going to disrupt my energy and flow the most? And like I reevaluate that every year. And so maybe, though I know you want to have community with this person, maybe, and since you're seeking advice, and this is not a coaching session for us, I would probably do like a evaluation of what is this person bringing to me? Do they ever reach out to you? Do they ever check on you? Just because someone's older doesn't mean that they're not out in the community. And is it ever just like a, hey, Melonya, I, saw the dog outside and I realized we haven't said hi in a while. Like, do they do any connection? Like, do they share that bridging with you, or is it just one sided? And if there's very little coming back from them, like, I would probably do a trial like, hey, I don't want you to disturb my flow because it's so much more valuable. And like, is anything shifting? Is anything that you've ever said to them, is it resonating? Like, do they come
No.
back and say like, hey, you know what? I really sat down because I was sitting and thinking like, and what you said, that was deep. It came back to me. If not, then maybe you do a trial cleanse of this person and see, like, I haven't talked to you in 2 months and I'm actually not
But
feeling bad about that.
here's the thing. I've noticed, because I tend to look after old people, and not old people, but people who are aging. They don't call as much. You call them and they go, oh man, I'm so glad you called because I was thinking about you, but they don't. And that's something, as we age, is something that we have to be more focus on making certain that we keep our connection. So they don't always reach out and call. And I don't check on her because of what she gives me. I reach out to her because it's the right thing to do, right? It's the
But
right.
why doesn't she reach out to you just in a neighborly way? Because, like, my neighbors are not older, right? And, like, I'm not the most communicative person, but they reach out to me and I reach out to them. So, and that doesn't have to be a call. Like, sometimes my neighbors will just pop a card, like, hey, happy, like, I get a holiday card from them. And we like, does she exchange a holiday card? She doesn't even have to mail it. She can just pop it in your box. Like,
But I'll be honest with you,
and that seems
Tahitia.
like something older people do.
Yeah, but I'll be honest with you. That's really not important to me. It really. I'm telling you who I am. That I'm not. I don't do it because there is an expectation that I'm going to get something from it. I don't. I do it because it's the right thing to do. I had a neighbor that I lived next to for many years, and especially after her husband died, I always checked on her, and luckily, I noticed something odd, in her house, and me and another neighbor went into her house, went to open the door, which was unlocked, and a day or two before, she had fallen, still
Mm.
had blood on her, right? And I alerted her family, and they took her to the hospital, and had to make arrangements for her after that, because she really wasn't able to live by herself. So I think it's what we do as good citizens. I think it's what we do as decent human beings. So I'm not looking for anything for it. I'm really not. And so if she never called or never sent a card or whatever, I don't have a beef with that. But I do have a beef with
So,
supporting someone in the most powerful position in this country, who is clearly a racist, a misogynist, a homophobic, hate-filled human being. I do have an issue with that.
So, and I know we're almost at time, but I'll just close on this. So it's not so much I'm saying to you, like, you're looking for something back. I'm saying that maybe your relationship with this neighbor is slightly different, because I've heard about this neighbor before, and it seems like y'all have like a neighborly friendship, which is kind of what I have with my next door neighbor. And so what I'm saying is, maybe just look and see, is it a neighborly friendship that is more one-sided, where you're just viewing it kind of like, well, I'm checking on her, but she's also talking to you about things. Like if it was just like, hey, how you doing? Like I just came in to chat. Like I just stopped by to check on you, and you weren't really engaging. Like just like, oh yeah, because I have a neighbor down the street who I always look for, and he says, and I wave to him, how you doing? Yeah, and it's we don't talk politics. We don't talk anything. Like it's not deep. Like it's just like, hey. So in this, and it feels like it's bothering you because I mean, it feels like a deeper connection, probably like my next door neighbors, than the one that I had with a gentleman down the street, where it was like I felt like it was more like neighborly community.
Well,
And so that's where and we are at times.
We're at the, with the connection, the deeper connection is really the deeper connection with my values. That's where the connection is, right? The connection is with my values and how I want to live as a human. And so we didn't solve this dilemma.
Yes, we didn't solve it, but I'm going to say this. In the comments, because you can make comments if you watch this on the replay, like what should Melonya do? Because I would be curious what the audience, if anyone listens to this, thinks. And Melonya, will you take their advice?
Yeah, you know what? I'm open to suggestions. You can find us on YouTube. We're MT Fridays, and we're going to sign out because we're at time. Yes. Thank you, Tahitia. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, folks, for whoever listens. Come back next Friday because that's where we're going to be.
Thanks for joining us on MT Fridays. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to like, subscribe, and share for more insightful discussions every Friday. Remember, the brain drain stops here, so keep the conversation going by connecting with us on social media or visiting our website. Until next time, stay curious and keep filling your mind with knowledge. See you next week, Friday, on MT Fridays.